points on the lesson. Live in the hills, but I still get a spread. Started with a live, but I still reinvest it. Fear how I feel, then it feel like a blessing. I just want the lesson, I just want protection. I'm up and I'm down, but they sound like progression. Farmer never plans if he waits for perfection. Finger to the down.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I got your watch list coming in at February 28th, 2022. And this week is going to be all about the global financial meltdown. Yes, I don't want to scare you, but what happened here over the weekend, this is probably going to be the closest to any sort of meltdown that we have seen since March 2020. And essentially, we may see the central bank step in. So I'm going to give it to you quick here. There was a lot of different updates. I have a very comprehensive watch list here. We got the plays. I have all of the news here over the weekend, but we really need to talk about some of the main issues. We have been bringing up oil, and commodities. That does still apply, but now, why would we be saying global financial meltdown? Well, there was some more targeted, swift action, so we'll talk about it a lot more. Even come ask on stream if you don't know, but essentially now, the thing that is happening right here, right now, over the weekend, the Russian ruble is going absolutely insane, almost devalued about 50%. So pretty much by the time we open up tomorrow, we are going to see a lot of commodities and a lot of currencies. They may very well go haywire. And if there is more escalation here with this SWIFT stuff, you may very well just block Russia out of the financial markets. And a lot of analysts are already calling for the fact that, well, central banks may need to step up. So we have an exciting week. We are going to see what happens. Again, you remember the bounce, and I encourage you, despite all the headlines and everything, this may take some time to develop here. So it's not always going to be reflected. That's why what we get tomorrow or the rest of the week, it will be very key. But now, wait till I get to all of the events. We have a action-packed week, from Warren Buffett annual letter to the Fed and Powell, and now everything going on. And then Putin, he said that you should be ready. He got the nuclear arm. It's crazy stuff. We're going to talk about it. So drop your thumbs up on that video and make sure you're subscribed. And if you don't know, we are live Monday through Friday, 30 minutes before open, youtube.com/thestockmarket. You don't want to miss it tomorrow morning. But today is Sunday. Tomorrow is Monday. We also have the random comment picker. Please do not forget, we need your help, Chad. You need to post a option trade, a random one, strike price, expiration date, all of that. Keep it below $100. And before the market opens tomorrow, we're going to do a random comment picker and then pick a play. And, well, it's holding up even despite the whole volatility. Not too bad. But right off the bat, like we said, the Forex and commodity markets, they are probably going to go berserk by the time things open. So I'll tell you this right now. There is a bunch of reports all across the internet. Pretty much, what is the exchange rate of the ruble? That is the big question that we're looking at. There was some other issues with oil, even non-related, and even some commodities and stuff going on at sea. But essentially, how everything played out this week, it is looking like any sort of materials and now even global currencies, they are probably going to do a lot. Even the dollar, and surprisingly, a couple of safe haven currencies have emerged, like the Colombian peso, which is pretty wild. But this is going to be a big effect tomorrow. That's what we're going to see. And now the real big issue, why people would even say financial meltdown, anything of that nature, it all has to do with what the central banks are going to do depending on if we get more swift reactions. So essentially, EU and a couple of people, I think it was Germany and even the US, I believe, weighed in on it, but they're trying to do certain targeted swift sanctions. Instead of making it broader, they want to identify and target certain Russia banks and other financial institutions, but it is already kind of causing this. What's going on with the banks? That's why I'm saying the debate about where the ruble opens tomorrow, that is going to be the key, because essentially, if you get a very high quote on the ruble above 100, even above 150, which is wild to say. Again, on Friday, it closed at 83, and that was already 30% above. But if it opens up there, that will confirm a lot, and it may very well start a bank run, not to mention everything going on there in Russia. So this is a very weird event. Again, it seems like it kind of escalated and then slowed down, but now you're seeing it. And like I've already said before here, I would not be surprised to watch this unfold all week. So even though I'm telling you all this stuff, I want you to look out for it. But you saw how the markets could bounce, and even how we could kind of be insulated from a lot of things going on here. But essentially, give it some time. We have seen things move a little bit slow slower, and then it speeds up and then kind of calms down. So you watched that with a lot of plays last week, so just keep this in mind for sure. But now, coming into your first pretty picture here is just a flow chart of the potential reactions. And if you guys remember, I've been talking to you guys a lot about this worst case scenario, and here it is. Again, pink is a severe reaction, orange is moderate, and then the light yellow, that would be a mild. But going to the worst one here, essentially, if the European gas supply gets halted or oil gets disrupted significant, again, if Russia wants to pull anything, or we, again, block them off of SWIFT or find a way to block their oil, the worst case scenario for the United States is that it turns into energy spiking with big inflation, and then this starts pushing the Fed narrative. Again, I want you to pay attention to this because people are bringing up the Fed with Ukraine. Don't forget this is important, and that's why, too, tomorrow we are going to have to be looking over this. So you could pause the screen, you could read through all of these and see what happens, and thankfully we've already been talking about this. Again, you could even see if they did smaller sanctions and then slowly started to escalate, what would happen, and you could kind of just see the whole picture. But by the looks of this chart, at the very least, we are going to get a mild reaction on financial systems in the world, if that is the best case scenario. Otherwise, you could see here a majority of the risk now, and depending on where this plays out for the rest of the week, things are starting to look a lot more severe. So we will see what happens. But coming into what exactly happened this week, and just to give you a little bit of a recap, here's what happened over the weekend. One positive thing, and it seemed positive, Ukraine and Russia, they agreed to have a meeting for diplomacy at the Belarus border. So that was good. But then the EU, they banned Russian aircraft from the airspace. They banned Russian state-owned media like RT or Sputnik, and then they also announced that they're going to be giving a lot more weapons to the Ukrainians. And then, this is what scared a lot of people here, Putin put the nuclear forces on high alert. Even the United States responded and said this was escalatory and unnecessary, but he said it was, quote, because of the aggressive statements by NATO members. So all of this combined, again, it's like every single hour, and I'm sure by the time we get the opening, or even by the time you watch this video, there probably will be little events trickling in. So keep your eye out for that. But now, as far as what to expect this week, even though all of the Russia-Ukraine stuff is crazy, this is still an action-packed week. You're going to have a Powell testimony, I believe either Tuesday and Wednesday or Wednesday and Thursday, but then you're also getting 5 other Fed members, including Bullard and John Williams, so they could be a little bit more aggressive, so we're going to watch out for that. Then you got Warren Buffett's annual letter. Berkshire Hathaway earnings are coming out, and that's where the long-awaited Buffett annual letter comes in, so people are going to be looking for that. Then Joe Biden has his first State of the Union on Tuesday, and then we're also getting OPEC and the non-farm payrolls. So there's definitely a lot of stuff this week beyond it. A lot of things are going to go back and forth, and that's why, depending on how things play out, we will really see whether this cools down or we start really looking into now the most severe situations, and then the Fed may be pushed into a corner. So we will see what happens. But coming into the company news and events, a lot of it is related to either Russia and energy. But now the Ruble offshore prices, they've hit as high as $200. I've even talked to a lot of people there. I have some friends all around the world. They're saying some banks are still giving about 85 to 100 for rubles, but that's why, like we said, we need to see where this opens. And again, the ruble closed at 82 on Friday. Again, if you've ever listened to me talk, and even when this situation was developing a couple of weeks ago or even a couple of months ago, we were talking about just watch the ruble. If things are really going to get bad, this thing is going to skyrocket, and that's what I'm saying. This is at 80. There is a couple of banks that are already exchanging at other prices, but ruble has never been this high, and recently it was just at 70. So keep this in mind, but this is probably going to be the biggest factor for tomorrow, not to mention whatever happens with SWIFT, and if it does lead to an immediate default of Russia's securities. Again, why could you have a financial collapse or global meltdown? Because depending on what happens with SWIFT or how the money goes, this is what happened during March 2020. That's why the Fed had to step in during the pandemic. A very big external situation hits, but it may lead to payments being missed. Doesn't matter what what happens if you miss a payment, you default. So there has to be some mechanism to step in, and that's where a lot of people are going to be watching. And whatever the ruble does, this will be very, very key. So keep your eye out for that. That was the first piece of news. Coming into the second piece of news, you are going to get the OPEC meeting this week, but they've already gave us a little hint. They said that they will probably stick to their plan of the output of 400 barrels a month or day, and they said that the recent jump in oil prices is due to global tensions and not supply-demand imbalance, and that's the reason why they said we're probably not going to add more oil, which is very negative for what it will do to the price of oil, aka it's going to rock it up. But there was that, and then Beijing, they're trying to stay in the middle, but they're kind of showing their support there to Russia. They abstained from a vote on the UN Security Council that condemned the invasion. They decided not to vote, and then this one is actually very historical. The UN Security General Council, they voted to have an emergency session of the General Assembly on Monday, and this is the first time in decades. They've had a couple of smaller ones, but regarding some new situation, this has not happened, and this is like the Fed calling an emergency meeting, but instead it's related to war and conflict and NATO, so keep that in mind. But there was that, and then this was the oil news not related to Ukraine, but Iraqi oil. They halted about two of their biggest fields that pump over 500,000 barrels of oil a day, and it was unrelated to Ukraine, so we'll see what happens there. But again, there's also another maritime issue with like boats and shipping, and if the global tensions do get bad, we talked about this the other day, one thing that can make prices go up a lot is actually insuring the shipment of oil. It's one thing to get the oil, but now shipping it, putting it on a ship, if there is a lot of global conflict through certain areas, the insurance premiums are actually starting to go through the roof. So keep your eyes out for that. And then BP, they are getting out of Russia, and they've announced that they are exiting a 20% stake of Rosneft. That's a Russia oil company. They got out of that. And then there was also reports that XOM, one of the banks that they have money in Russia, it is holding some of their money. So we'll see how that one plays out. And this one, I mean, just on top of everything you got this weekend, North Korea was believed to have resumed missile testing on Sunday. I was wondering where Kim Jong was in the middle of all this, but he's like, don't forget about me. But watch out for that. And then Elon, man, you know, I'm really starting to like Elon lately, man. He has activated Starlink in Ukraine to hook him up with internet. So people were worried about losing connection and all that. You know, Elon, when world crisis, he's like, I got the tunnel. I got this. He's ready to go. So he did that. That was pretty cool news. We'll see what happens with that. And then getting here into more company news over the weekends, Amazon, they announced that they will be selling digital advertising space inside of their physical stores to generate some additional revenue. That was pretty interesting. And then Ford, they announced that they will be halting F-150 production at their Kansas City factory due to the chip shortage. And then Twitter, they are pausing advertisements in Ukraine and Russia, and they even announced some measures for like vulnerable security profiles, as they're worried that certain tweets from certain people might cause some things. So that was interesting. And then Uber, this one I think it might be good, but again, a lot of travel stocks are probably going to get knocked tomorrow. But Uber announced that they are testing a new algorithm that will allow drivers to view payment and destinations before accepting rides, and this is all in hopes of spurring more driver demand or getting them to take more drives. So pretty interesting. A lot of new stuff. Literally, again, everything was all about Russia, Ukraine, and if it wasn't about that, it was about what the central banks are going to do related to Russia and Ukraine. And then if it wasn't about that, it was all about the price of oil or oil and commodity news. So we got our work cut out for us. This is definitely what is going to dominate the headlines over the week. Things are going to happen fast, and just like we already got to learn from last week, there's going to be a lot of volatility, and it may slow down a little bit, but this situation is boiling, and we're going to probably play a lot of back and forth. So I hope you're ready, but that is pretty much it. So let us get into the plays. So right off the bat, I got 3 or 4 stocks that I'm looking at coming into tomorrow. We talked a lot about these last week, and there is one, or actually a couple that I really like, but I'm going to start here with B&O and Alcoa. This is what we brought up yesterday. We made some plays, and honestly, I thought it would take a little bit longer considering how we kind of chilled out. Again, it seemed like it was a little bit slow down last week, but now with everything over the weekend, chances are a lot of commodities commodities and oil are going to be crazy. And BNO, that is Brent crude. Again, oil everywhere will probably go up, but you have to understand WTI is different than Brent crude, and Europe uses more Brent crude. That is the one that has a higher premium. So, going to be looking at those Alcoa plays that we had too, those Marches. Some of those were very cheap, so watch out for that. But now, we talked about this a lot last week. I wouldn't be surprised for some of these things to trade like the VAX stocks. Essentially, you may get a big pop there in the morning off the volatility, but if everything kind of turns risk off, they may gap up 5-10% and then slowly start to sell off. Or if they do gap up, this could be a good opportunity because sometimes it'll gap up and come down, and then the premiums will literally not move in the morning. This is something I am going to be watching. Alcoa tomorrow morning, even oil, if you're going to go after any commodity plays, even Lockheed Martin as well as a defensive, just watch the premiums in the morning because there will be a possible delay. Sometimes in that first 30 minutes to an hour, the options will be extremely cheap. If the volatility holds up, you will slowly notice all of the premiums. They will take off even if the stock goes down. Literally, you watch this on the Alcoa play last week. I can't stress this enough. We've learned a lot over the last few weeks, but just understand how it's been playing with options in general. It's one thing to find the play, but it's also dealing with the premiums and volatility. So these are the Alcoa plays that we're holding, but you could see throughout the last couple days, they held those premiums. Then that one day there on Thursday when it went really crazy, Alcoa jumped up and then the options went up. But even as the stock was dropping, for the most part, they actually held their value. Then they came down right back to the original price. And then what happened? Premiums dropped here in the morning, then the stock went up, and then you slowly started watching them catch up. So I would expect them a lot to trade like this. And if you don't remember, we keep bringing this up. If you remember during the VAX stocks, when a lot of them would go crazy, what would end up happening? There would be bad COVID news. A lot of the vaccine stocks, they would jump up 15%, or it would be approval or bad COVID news. They would shoot up. Premiums would go up. And then literally by the end of the day, the stocks would end negative, even though it would gap up 15%. But the options were a little bit wonky. So just keep this in mind. This is something I'm looking out for. But like we've discussed from last week, Brent crude, materials, all of these plays are going to be on watch, especially if we do get to any sort of severe reaction. Again, this is what we need to keep in mind. This flow chart may actually show us a lot of things, so watch out for that. That is the first play. The second play, Lockheed Martin, again, same logic there as above. It may move like some of these weird option premiums that we've seen, but the short term could be good. I know the chain is wild. I am going to be watching out for this, but Lockheed, they had crazy moves last week. We are still going to try to find some arbitrage opportunities. Again, what I'm saying with these contracts, you still may be able to play them, but we got to be careful. And then on top of it, just don't forget about some of the other defensive names. They might actually all get a boost tomorrow, maybe even RTX, but don't forget HII. We had a play on that one. It's not too crowded, and they could even benefit off of it. So we will see what happens as far as the play. We are still holding that 420 call for March. Again, we bought this at like $1 and change, but again, you could see everything on this option chain. At one point, Lockheed was higher last week during a lot of the drama, but the premiums somehow were cheaper. And then even that day, you saw what happened. You had the gap up premium, and then it started to chill out, slowly edged up towards the day, and then out of nowhere, with even a tiny gap up, literally at the same prices, the options went up like 200-300%. So essentially, watch out for that delayed reaction. It's like a weird low-hanging or like a stealth frog, more or less, and that's what I'm saying to watch out for. So gonna be watching these, and like I'm saying, I will want to look at the short terms. I wanted these last week, but a lot of the premiums and spreads are crazy, and you see how they're all over the place, so might create an opportunity, but watch out for these gap up moves. 2 or 3 hours into the day, some of these defensive, if there's no quick arbitrage opportunity, these ones may be pretty good, so keep your eye out for them. That is the second play. And then third, man, I'm really sad to say this, but Booking, and it's sad because it's probably going to affect Airbnb. Again, everything going on right now. I mean, you guys got to really realize this is just I don't want to call it a humanitarian crisis, but it is very bad. There's a lot of things happening to a lot of people, but this could really start to dent travel. And Booking, if you don't remember, on a lot of these days, they were down the most out of any company. Literally, the amount of bookings drop, it accounted for at one point like Facebook, Google, and Amazon combined on on the NASDAQ, believe it or not. So depending on how this plays out, I think there could be a lot of opportunities. I want to see what happens here with Booking, but they're definitely going to be one to watch. Maybe even Airbnb, but Booking, they have the most global exposure. So watch out for them. And then finally, don't get too jumpy on this one. I want to see what happens. And again, this is a confusing scenario. We are going to get a ton of back and forth, but TLT, baby, if the Fed steps in, TLT will become bullish. Again, if the Fed needs to step in, global markets get disturbed. If somebody defaults, aka Russia, and it leads to whatever, then the Fed may need to come in. They're going to start buying bonds. They're going to want to make sure our rates don't go too crazy. And then at the very least, if all of that Russia money has to go somewhere, if people are moving it out, you're getting a lot of this. Surprisingly, U.S. bond markets, they could be attractive, so we will see what happens. But depending on the situation too, remember, the big risk is if it gets bad enough, even though people would want the Fed to support things, the Fed may be required to raise rates, but then TLT may be advantageous because if they raise the short term, I wouldn't be surprised if, I don't know if the situation warranted some sort of yield curve control, and that would mean buying the long end of the curve, raising the short end, and they'll try to find a way to control it despite purposely flattening it. Again, very complex, very crazy, but essentially, we've really got to watch TLT. There will be opportunities, but clearly there is also a lot of opportunities all around the market right now. So we'll see what happens. Again, I wouldn't be surprised for the market to even eke out a green day tomorrow. It doesn't have to always be bad. That's why the question is really, where do things open coming into tomorrow? So watch out for that. But as far as everything else, I'm going to be watching Lockheed, XOM. We still got those calls. We'll see what happens. They may have the gap up and sell off, but like we said, there was reports of them having some money in Russia bank accounts, so watch out for that. Watch Brent crude and Alcoa like we talk about. Yandex, this one had a lot of back and forth on Friday. They have new contracts. Gonna be watching them. We'll see if we'll be able to play it, but again, a lot of countries, even Norway, they're cutting all Russia assets from their sovereign wealth fund, so pretty much anything Russia related might really get sold off hard tomorrow, so we will see. We got the Boeing puts. I want to see if they get a defensive reaction, but remember, they are probably going to be a sanctioned target there of Russia. Maybe even China, I don't know, but they're trying to stay neutral, but keep your eye out for them tomorrow. And then Tesla, we have that put. I want to see if it gets back to those levels. We'll just see how it plays out. And then Baba, they got affected last time. Remember, we were saying that Baba may very well get some buying if the yuan holds some stability, but this may knock it down one more level. We're going to see again. Just depends, but I really wouldn't be surprised tomorrow if a lot of things are red, and you may get one of those weird opposite days with some of the China stocks, so watch out for that. And then going to keep my eyes on a couple of other names. We talked about it. JP Morgan, I like them as a potential bank stock pick here for the long term, even so I'm still going to keep my eyes out on some of these, believe it or not. And then another one I want to watch here as a final one will be Facebook. Again, they had the little bit of a bounce, but we'll see how they kind of sell off. Remember, this is some of the tech with the most weakness. You can even apply Netflix to that category too, but like we talked about, some big tech, it may not have the effect that you're thinking, whereas a lot of these travel names and smaller companies, if they're weak, they could outweigh the impact there on the NASDAQ, so watch out for that. And then finally, I grabbed a small NVIDIA put due to some hacking rumors. We'll see. We have a short term on there, but keep your eye out for them. And then TLT in the dollar, watch if it catches that safe haven bid, whether it's because of the Fed or even a lot of global money comes in. Otherwise, we will see. Again, the big key for this week, we need to see the consequences of what happens, and it may take more than a week to development, but even if it happens short term, we need to watch the Fed futures. Again, you're going to hear from Powell in the Fed this week, but in the midst of all of this, you need to understand the worst case scenario for the United States and United States equity markets. It is not just what happens with Russia and oil. It is now compared to how the Fed will have to respond. So, depending on what happens with the Fed futures, we will be monitoring those tomorrow. They may very well give us a signal, and I do really think they are a leading indicator. So, we'll see what happens, and hopefully we get a signal. But that is your watch list, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure hydrate healthy, ready to go. Make sure post your watch list. Make sure we see you there in the morning. I need the armor on. I need the helmet shining. I need you to remember, baby, movement's better than nothing. But the Cole loves you. I love you. I'm gonna see you in the morning. Let's go.